Hello, everyone. I am Jill Reddish, the co-founder of the Global Cannabis Network Collective, and welcome to our podcast today, where we're digging into a very special mini-series on leadership in cannabis industry. I am joined by a special co-host, Stephanie Pow, the founder of Emerald Lane Recruitment. Today, we're here to talk with Timo Bongartz from Cannavigia, and we're going to have a really interesting conversation about all things European cannabis, seed to sale, and leadership. So, Stephanie, thank you so much for co-hosting with me today. Really excited for this episode.
Absolutely. Well, hello, good day, everyone. Jill, thanks so much. As noted, I'm Stephanie Pow. So I'm founder of Emerald Lane Recruitment. We work across the cannabis industry global supply chain. And I'm so excited to be speaking to Timo today as somebody who has well respected in the European space as well as on a global markets. He's going to be celebrating his 10th year anniversary in the industry. And I'll let him share a little bit of his story. But Timo, thank you so much for joining us today. You've been on quite an adventure over the last 10 years. I'm sure you could write a few books by now. And we wanted to have you on today because, to me, you're just an example of what a leader should be and should do. And you've been part of this industry for so long. So why don't you start by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and about your journey over the last sort of 10 years in the space?
Yeah, hello, Jill. Hi, Stephanie. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Timo. I'm the CEO of Cannavigia. Cannavigia is a seed to sale software company. We also do a little bit of consulting. We are active worldwide and not in Canada and the US, mostly in Europe. And how I got into the space, 10 years ago, I started my career in the horticulture space at Osram, so in the lighting arena. And I worked for Osram quite some time. And my goal back then was to bring Osram into the horticulture space. Back then, Osram was not really active in it, but other lighting companies, very well known, Dutch ones especially, were very active. And I was starting there as an innovation manager, as similar like an entrepreneur, so like an entrepreneur in a corporate. And Osram is a very old traditional German lighting company. So, driving innovation in an entrepreneurial setup was very interesting time of my career. And in the first years, I did a lot of projects in horticulture, all different kind of crops, high wire crops like tomatoes, cucumbers, but also soft fruits like strawberries, flowers like phalaenopsis or chrysanthemums, but also cannabis, of course. And the more cannabis picked up and became legal in Europe, I could dive more into this cannabis space, which was a great journey and continues until today in my role as at Cannavigia.
Amazing. And when you think back to those early days, like working, as you said, an entrepreneur in sort of a large global company, I think in the coming years, we're going to see a lot of companies that are non-cannabis trying to get into cannabis. What did that look like trying to get buy-in from the stakeholders and the board of directors and even trying to introduce them to cannabis? What was that like?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So at the beginning, it was really about showing traction, and it's a little bit like you need to get the board of directors as it's like your investors, right? I needed to get money to do more. Obviously, I was a one-man show at the beginning, and then obviously we increased the team and did a couple of initiatives. But this to convince the board, it was all about showing tractions, doing minimal viable products. And so what we did is we developed lighting systems, very unique lighting systems for NASA, for example, because they had the question how to colonize Mars and how to grow in on the ISS and so on. So it was about a project where we can do spectrum tuning. And that's 10 years ago, right? Just today we talk about spectrum tuning. It's 10 years what I'm talking about, right? So, and that was project with the NASA where we had special lighting. We developed a little, together with the startup, a little fridge where you can grow at home. And there was the first time that the board ate, leafy greens, which have been totally artificially grown. And that they couldn't believe it, to be honest, right? And there we got interest, and then you got buy-in, and you got support, and and that ultimately led to the situation that we all this was nice, and it showed the possibilities of light in the space. But of course, as a company like Osram doing billions in revenue, that we need to push the needle, right? It needs to have an effect on the P&L at the end. So that's why we back then decided to do an acquisition, and then Osram acquired Fluence, which is again a couple of years ago, to make a bolder move into the horticulture space. Back then, Fluence was really focusing on cannabis North America. So convincing the board, a German 120-year-old company, to invest into a cannabis company, it was interesting. I cannot, tell you all the little stories, but I had amazing board meetings where I was sitting and trying to making the case. And obviously, at the beginning, it was not like, yeah, let's do it. Of course, it needs convincing. It needed to show a good business case and so on. And then later on, yeah, there was enough good reasons to invest and do this bold step back in the days, and it was a big success.
I was not expecting to hear stories about NASA and the International Space Station on an interview about leadership in cannabis, but a whole, new frontiers for all of this, for all of us. That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. But it was unfortunately not about how to grow cannabis in outer space, but food. Yeah, but it was interesting times for sure. And then later on came this movie, even the Marzianen or something yeah, this movie
The
where he
Martian with Matt Damon or something.
exactly with Matt Damon, how he grows potatoes and so on, and we were like all sitting there like now it comes all together.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's so much pioneering spirit in cannabis. I feel like I have noticed. And honestly, like I'm sitting here in the American West, I'm based in Denver. I think a lot about the pioneer kind of mentality that it takes to, do something entirely new. And I think it's exciting in European cannabis. We meet a lot of people who are very future focused, thinking, pioneering, let's get creative with things. So I love hearing this background, Timo. This is amazing. I think one of the next questions that we wanted to dive in for you is just some of your reflections on leadership skills and what you see that it takes for leaders in cannabis. Because as we just said, you have to do a lot of convincing. There's not that tradition of we've been doing it this way for 100, 150 years. It's pretty obviously with some of the cultivation techniques there is, of course, but there's so much you know dynamic skill sets that are required in this. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that and what kind of almost what surprises you about being a leader in cannabis.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that compared to other businesses I had been involved, cannabis is in this way unique because it's a market which goes from an illegal to a legal market. So it highly depends on regulations and so on, and that means very often that my toolkit as an entrepreneur is limited because there are external factors opening up a window of opportunity or not, and so on. It's not always on the team and the companies to realize a vision, because some things are external factors. There are chances but also risks, right? So that is one thing which makes it a little bit unique, because a lot of business practices, you cannot really just putting a vision out, working on a strategic milestone plan and hitting your milestones, because some so it's much more scenario planning, different, if this comes then this and so on. So very often our strategy looks a little bit more complex because there are different ways where it goes left and right. So that is one thing I see as a leader in the cannabis space. Yeah, and that's very important to observe these market developments. And I personally often also share these developments on LinkedIn because and share about it because we are all sitting in the same boat. We are depending on regulations. So, as early there is something new coming up, I like to share it and to get outside in views and innovation because I don't share it to boost my ego that I get a lot of likes, maybe as well, I don't know, but mostly to get people involved and discuss about it because that is helping me and our business as well because you need perspectives and viewpoints from outside of your organization. Otherwise, you cook always with the same recipes, right? And that is one thing which I really learned, which is different to other businesses. And another, maybe a second thought is I think in cannabis, the stakeholder management is extremely interesting because they're so heterogeneous teams. Very often, I deal with startups, and then there is investor involved. There's a real or a person who has a lot of pharma background, is very according to the book, and then there's maybe a grower who came from the legacy market and never documented anything because that was what has been learned. Never put your name anywhere. So this is just a small example of how complex it can get because all these three in this example are decision-making units. They decide if we go this or that route, and you need to get all on board. But they are very heterogeneous. They have a different viewpoint partly, but to sell something, you need to convince all of them, and they have different perspectives on a matter.
That's such a great point and such a sophisticated understanding of how small groups of people come to make decisions together. And I love that you pointed out, with what you do on LinkedIn, that you're putting ideas and conversation starters out there to spark some conversation and to hear from other people because the being able to place value on what other people have to say, how other people interpret a situation, that's got to be really invaluable for that very first point that you said of it requires scenario planning. It's not a straightforward path. It's scenario planning with different options on the table.
Yeah. And it's sometimes not easy to keep all balls in the air, right? Because maybe this is coming or that is coming, and you want to don't miss the opportunity if it comes up. So it's sometimes challenging to keep all scenarios alive, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think Timo, what you reflected on as well is another sort of leadership skill we see unique to the cannabis space, as you noted, is like leaders, you can't just be good at what you do. And we see this from a recruitment perspective and human capital perspective. You can't just be good at what you do. You have to be aware of all the other departments that are happening and how they all work together and the different nuances, as well as you said, existing under this regulatory framework that all have to be a part of and all have to follow. And so I think that takes the ownership back on the individual stepping into these leadership positions, whether that's cultivation, production, quality assurance, strategic leadership, that they're really taking ownership to do the best work they do, but then also being open, understanding that everyone else is trying to do the best work they do within the confines of this larger regulatory framework that we all, and box that we all have to sort of work within.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, got to be really dynamic.
And given the work you've been doing in lighting and now with seed to sale, you're really under the hood with a lot of these companies and sort of seeing them in these early stages and probably getting a lot of truth that a lot of people don't see. So, not only are you leading your own group, but the consulting you're doing and the work you're doing, is also helping inform future markets as well. And we were earlier talking about the pilot projects. So you made a fantastic post yesterday about celebrating the new Netherlands coffee shop pilot project, and you're heavily involved in the Switzerland pilot project. What do you think we're learning about that, and how can future leaders, look at those markets and use them to learn, as well as their own sort of future pilot project startups that we might see in other regions or countries?
Yeah, I think the main goal of any pilot project in Europe, because I get this question often from the US or Canada, it's like, why are you doing pilot projects, right? And the answer is there's two reasons. One, it's because of, again, regulations. We cannot just legalize recreational cannabis because of UN law, EU law, and so on. Because under these laws, it is you're not allowed to trade recreational cannabis. So it means if you legalize for your country, you need to grow everything in your country. And these everything is a lot because it's still, or not still, but the consumption rates are very high across Europe. So if you pull the switch, you need to supply, and that is not so easy to be done, right? So that's why a pilot project is a vehicle to do so, and in the framework. And the other thing is, um, the European countries only legalize if it kind of makes sense, right? And if the society is in favor of a cannabis legalization and so on. And to do so, you need evidence. And we don't have any evidence because it was always illegal. So there is no great data we can look at. So that means we need to create this data. And that is but the whole focus or the whole goal of these pilot projects to create data to make then evidence-based legalization. And that is always important to keep in mind. So if we look into the different pilot projects, let's talk first about the Netherlands, because indeed it's a kind of historical day, beginning of April, why we have this session here, because it is now at the point where in 10 cities across the Netherlands, now the coffee shops need to get all their supply from legal sources. And that is, as you know, coffee shops exist forever, right? But it was always illegal, and in the moment it is on the shelf in a coffee shop, it's legal, and then you can sell it. Ta-da! So that is kind of absurd, right? So what they did is, okay, we want to now legalize also the supply. So they said, okay, for cities outside, we're not talking Amsterdam, Rotterdam, because they're too big, but outside these two big cities, the coffee shops need to now switch to legal supply. And that's why they years ago said, okay, there will be 10 producers who produce the flour and the hash and so on for these coffee shops. And now today is the day where they need to only get the supply from the legal sources. And that's interesting, of course, right? Because what it means, all the old supply agreements with whoever need to end, and it's now all of a sudden legal, right? So it's a huge shift, cultural shift, supply shift, new stakeholders involved, and so on. So that is very interesting. Obviously, the challenge is and was until today to get these producers up and running and produce enough volume, but even more enough product portfolio. Because in the past, the coffee shops had hash from Morocco or Lebanese or Thai weed and you name it, right? From all over the world, black Afghan hash or whatever. And now it can be only come from the Netherlands. And especially if you produce, as an example, out of a greenhouse or an indoor facility, flour to make hash out of it, it's it needs to economically still make sense for the cultivators, right? So now the challenge obviously is enough volume and enough product portfolio, but now they are out of these 10, several are operational and produce enough, so it seems to be working out. But yeah, we will see collect data collectively, and then, as said, use this for a broader legalization also in the Netherlands. Obviously, it would be great if you visit Amsterdam, that you also can buy weed grown in the Netherlands and sold in the Netherlands and consumed in the Netherlands. Would be a nice thing. So hopefully Amsterdam and Rotterdam will follow soon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
so
so interesting to
sorry.
see all of these. It's so interesting to see all of these global supply chains and the different kind of supply and demand forces that exert, because it makes sense to transition and to create your market in one way, but the reality of, as you mentioned, they have been selling products from Morocco and Thailand and California for sure, all over the
For
place, and
sure.
yet, yeah, huge transition right now for how they're doing it. And one day it's going to be a really interesting case study. But we're currently living through it and dealing with the messy demands on leadership for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting because was the example of the Netherlands, which is happening momentarily. In Switzerland, the pilot projects go already. Several of these go already 2 years, roughly 2 years. So there is the first data, and the majority of this data, which is collected, is around buying and consumption behavior. Because the lawmaker in the Switzerland wants to understand, okay, if you offer, not only flower but also vapes, are the people converting over from smoking spliffs, as you know, in Europe, most of the people smoke spliffs, which is with tobacco, to vapes because it's harm reduction. It would be something good, right? If you offer that, if the people do something which is less harmful, right? And also they understand, okay, with the amount of product portfolio, who is still buying in the illegal market and who is not, and all these things around consumption and buying behavior is helping then to make a legalization. And in Switzerland, the government said recently that they are now working on the legalization. So 2 years in the pilot project, now it doesn't mean it comes. We hope, fingers crossed, but it shows
Yeah.
evidence-based that, okay, it makes sense, right? Now, I give you another example. Germany, as you know, it's also in the discussion of doing pilot projects. Maybe when we broadcast this or publish this, maybe there's now news that pilot projects in
Right.
Germany are coming. I would be ultra happy about it, I can tell you. But coming back there, this is still to be seen if the Germans do the pilot project. But 1 year ago, the law changed in Germany, as you know, which means since April last year, you can grow at home. Easier access to medical cannabis, as well as cultivation clubs. And there is, since this also data has been collected, and I want to give you one interesting data point. In the city of Stuttgart, which is it's a big city in Germany, they did wastewater checks every week to see if the consumption of cannabis went up. And guess what? Barely it went up. And every one of the opposition who's against cannabis legalization says, oh, everyone will smoke cannabis on the streets, on the kindergarten. There is not such a point. And also the whole consumption did not really go up. So there is no evidence when you legalize that all of a sudden, whatever dystopian idea you have, that all of a
Not going
sudden
to be reefer
everyone is.
madness.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
no,
Not
no reefer
everyone is
madness.
now going crazy or anything. No, it's the opposite. We don't see a big increase of consumption, but what we saw, a big increase of supply. So meaning if the consumption does not go up, but the supply got legalized, it means you took it away from the black market. Easy like that. It's and that is interesting data, of course, which helps to have really fact-based discussions.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the data is so important, and there's so much change in the regulatory, and pilot projects, and so much happening in all these countries. I feel like Jill and I probably both learned so much from this conversation, and we are quite immersed in the global markets. We both do a lot of research and work in it. So I feel like this sort of insights that you provide, this sort of the feedback is so helpful. And speaking of all the global leaders you work with, the ability to listen and learn from other leaders like yourself who are ingrained in these markets, to listen and learn firsthand about what they're seeing, and then be able to, as you said, take that back and integrate into a business strategy. There's a lot of people in the global markets looking at Germany, and everyone thinks they're gonna go, okay, wait, what's the data telling us? What are the actual people who are working in it? How do, as a leader, then, as you said, take the data? We have amazing conferences as part of our industry, panels. You'll be also at ICBC in Berlin, and so will Jill and I doing our C-suite mixer there. But there's definitely that opportunity to come and listen and learn, and that's also a huge part of leadership in this industry, is showing up and listening to each other and learning together and sharing our own truth and then wisdom and sharing from the others. So I really appreciate you providing all of this to us today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sharing is caring, right? It's like if we live in a world of uncertainty, we can help each other to get clarity if we share information and brainstorm about it and find smart ideas to work in the framework which is given to us, which we partly cannot change. So we need to accept it. That's also something I really learned, the hard lesson. It's not what I wish or what we wish. It is what is there. Deal with it. Deal with it. Don't complain. Don't be a German. I'm German. I can say that. Don't be a German about it and complain. Act in the framework which is given to you, and make the best out of it.
Yeah, accept reality and work with what we're given. I get that. Always a good reminder to hear that for sure.
And you use the word wish, Timo. So we're gonna wrap up here because we could talk all day about all of this, but we're coming to the end now. So as noted, we're asking everybody who's part of the series, what is your one sort of win for 2025 or in recent memories, and what's your wish for the year ahead?
Yeah. So what is my wish? My wish is really that Germany is doing pilot projects. Because why? Because I really believe that this will create evidence for the society in Germany to be really well educated around this topic. So far, it's not existing, so that would be really my wish. And there are some very nice cities which are on the forefront of it. So that is my wish: pilot projects in Germany. And when. Yeah, I think the best for me, or what's driving my motivation, is always if I have happy clients. And I work on one project specifically, which is in Costa Rica, which is a beautiful country. 100% on regenerative energy, plenty of water. So it's great to grow cannabis there. And yeah, they will be entering the German market. And yeah, this project is yeah, a very nice project and a big win for us. And yeah, that is what I could have chosen others, but this one I really like.
That's exciting. Plus, you planted in everybody's minds some imagery of beautiful beach scenes in the Caribbean kind of tropical life. So that's always a little bit of a mood
Exactly.
boost for us. Thank you. I love that. Well, Timo, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciated this conversation. We touched on such interesting things, and thank you for sharing some of your insight on your leadership perspective and how you see things shaping up in Europe. I hope to have many more conversations with you through the GCNC, and as we mentioned, we'll all be hanging out at ICBC together, trying to figure out how do we just keep making business out of cannabis together. So thank you for joining us today, Timo.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jill and Stephanie. It was a big pleasure, and we will see us in Berlin in a couple of weeks. And until then, everyone have a great day. And thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.